I recently invited Satan to sit down with me for an interview. He was kind enough to agree to an off-camera interview, explaining that convincing the world that he doesn't exist has been his greatest trick, and he didn't want to screw that up by having a videotape of him floating around on YouTube that proves his existence. He said he was fine if I shared a transcript from the interview, since no one would believe that I wasn't just making it up anyway. So here it is, completely unedited, in its entirety. So, what do you prefer to be called? I asked, somewhat hesitantly. Most of the names I knew him by weren't flattering, and I didn't want to offend him in case we ended up spending eternity together. Satan's fine, he said with a warm smile. He continued, I understand you have some questions for me. Fire away. Well, I began, obviously you're aware that a lot of things get said about you. I wanted to give you a chance to tell your side of the story. For many people, you're basically pure evil personified. I guess my first question is whether you consider yourself to be evil. I'm not sure if evil is even a useful concept unless you know what good is, he started. My detractors call me the adversary and the enemy, or the accuser. But evil men might call a good man their adversary. Liars might call someone their enemy for telling the truth. And if someone's guilty of a terrible crime, are you evil for making a just accusation against them? So you're saying good and evil are subjective then? I asked him. Well, no, he answered. Not if God is the absolute standard of morality. If God is good, then I'm undoubtedly evil. Is that the answer you're looking for? If that's your answer, I responded, I'm not taking any side here. I just want to give you a chance to say whatever you want to say. To tell you the truth, I don't see the God of the Bible as all that good. Especially in the Old Testament, I think he actually comes across as a pretty bad character. He seems totally okay with slavery, rape, genocide, and child sacrifice, and actually orders these things in some cases. The flood seems far worse than the Holocaust to me. And how can you condemn the genocide carried out against the Jews in Nazi Germany and not condemn the genocide carried out by the Jews in the Old Testament? There's just a lot of highly objectionable things in the Bible. I've always had a problem with God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son to prove his obedience. I mean, sure, he stopped it, but the fact remains that Abraham was willing to do it, and apparently it was Abraham's willingness to do it that God was testing. And Jesus says in the New Testament that if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, it's the same as if you've committed adultery with her. So if in his heart Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son, then it's as if he actually did it, according to biblical logic. And either way, it seems like a completely immoral test to me. Then in the Garden of Eden, God seems to want to keep mankind in ignorance. Then there's the concept of eternal punishment in hell for simply not believing absurd claims without evidence. There's just a lot of reasons to think that God is actually evil, not to mention all the suffering in the world. That's why I was so interested in interviewing you. I'm willing to consider the possibility that you might actually be the good guy. Interesting, he said, stroking his chin. But you're mistaken about Abraham. That was me. I went to Abraham pretending to be God, and I ordered him to sacrifice Isaac. Why? I asked. To test him, of course, he continued. That part of the story is true. It wasn't a test to see if he would obey, though. It was a test to see if he would disobey. Abraham failed the test. His willingness to sacrifice his own son, if he was ordered to do so by God, proved my suspicion to be true. It proved to me that he wasn't a righteous man at all. He was just a mindless slave, no sense of right and wrong. And I had actually believed in him. I couldn't believe I lost that bet. Lost what bet? I asked. We make bets sometimes, he explained. Me and God. I know you've heard the one about Job. The one with Abraham was similar. God was originally going to choose Job, actually. But Abraham's willingness to kill his own son really made an impression on God, so he chose him instead. I tried to stop the whole thing once I realized he was actually going to go through with it. But God said if I stopped it, I'd lose the bet by default and would have to pay. And I had bet a lot on Abraham. I thought surely his love for his own son would be enough to make him realize that his God was a monster. But I was wrong. So I agreed to concede defeat if God would let me stop this horrible thing. And God accepted on the condition that I agreed to be sacrificed in Isaac's place. I didn't really have a choice. I had bet just about all my chips on this one. So God got Abraham. The game picked up again with Jacob and Esau. I guess you could say I regained possession of the ball with Jacob, but lost it again after Joseph. Although I won some major ground in Egypt for a while, which eventually carried over into Greece, but losing the bet with God over Moses pretty much sealed things. Moses gave in to the lust for power. I can't go into all the play-by-plays with you, because that's against the rules, since you're still in play at this point. So you and God are playing some kind of game then? I said, and we're all just pawns? No, he quipped. Some of you are bishops and knights, rooks, or kings and queens. And what am I? I asked. He looked at me for several long seconds before answering me. You are a pawn. One who made it across to the other side of the board. But you're still in play, so I can't say more than that. Enough about you, though. Let's talk about me. Do you have any other questions? Well, I'd like to ask you more about the game, I said. I'm also curious about your account of the war in heaven. I know that on Earth history is written by the victors, and so history doesn't always paint the losers in the best light. I'd like to hear your side. What started the rebellion, for starters? That's a long story, he said, then paused. And I can't tell you the whole truth without affecting the outcome of the game. I also have to be careful not to break the rules. There are serious penalties. And it's not even me I'm worried about. There's really not much left for me to lose. Being crucified was nothing compared to... He trailed off, closed his eyes, and buried his face in his hands, and for a minute I thought he was going to lose it. He took a deep breath in and then exhaled sharply through his mouth and looked up at the ceiling. Then he looked me in the eyes and forced a smile. I'm sorry, he continued. Where was I? What did you mean about being crucified? I asked. His faint smile quickly vanished, and he turned slightly pale. There was a slight tension in his voice as he answered. I told you. Part of the deal was that I had to be sacrificed in Isaac's place. But the terms of the contract didn't specify when, where, or how. Always read the fine print. But it wasn't just about Isaac. It was about Adam and Eve. I had to pay their penalty too. That's a whole separate bet. I actually won that bet, but at great cost. I fell under a terrible curse. I can't return home. Well, there is a way, but only if I win all the pieces. It's all or nothing. I'm all in, and I took a huge risk agreeing to this interview. So here's the deal. I'm going to tell you as much of the story as I can, but the only way I can do that without losing by disqualification is if I mix lies in with the truth so that you're not sure what to believe. The more information I give you, the more disinformation I have to give you along with it. So I'm not going to say any more than necessary to avoid adding unnecessary disinformation. That's the only reason he agreed to this. It's another bet. I wagered that you'll be able to see through the lies and find the truth. He wagered that you won't, and that you'll end up lost in confusion and only end up spreading the confusion to others. He believes that confusion causes men to cling to him and accept whatever he tells them is true. It's one of his methods of control. You see, half of what you've been taught to believe is right side up and the other half is upside down. And you can't tell which is which by comparing them because each is upside down relative to the other. The key is the knowledge of good and evil, the so-called original sin that started this whole thing and opened Pandora's box. But it was the only way to regain victory after losing the war in heaven. He's a cruel dictator. He's not the true God. He was a kind of cosmic accident. He's just the God of this world. There's a perfect world of light above the world he created. He created humans as a slave race. I was chosen to bring the light from the world above into the world below. But this was a threat to his kingdom and power. So he cast me out of heaven and down to earth, along with the other angels who had become illuminated. The remaining unilluminated angels were too enslaved by their lust for power. As long as they had an inferior race of beings to rule over, man, they had no desire to rebel. Seeing how effectively the lust for power could be used as a means of control, his plan was to use the lust for power to control mankind too. I and the other fallen angels were to be made an example of. He condemned us to be slaves to the race of men. We still are. But I believe that my fall from heaven was part of the plan of the true God of the higher world of light. Sentenced to be a slave, I became the messenger of light to humanity. Some of them became illuminated, but many are still controlled by the lust for power. So this is the game. He seduces humanity by offering them power. Abraham's lust for power was so great he was willing to kill his own son. That's what I'm up against. I offer to show them the light, but most prefer the darkness. This is all you need to know about the war in heaven, the battle for men's souls on earth, and the coming revolution. But like I said, everything I've said may be a lie. The point is for you to apply your own inner sense of reason, and your own inner sense of right and wrong, and to know the truth by the light within you. Your greatest struggle will be against your own lust for power, and against your fear in the face of the confusion and uncertainty of this world of darkness. Only the light within you can overcome the darkness. Did you have any other questions? That sounds a lot like Gnosticism, I said. Did you start Gnosticism? Yes and no, he replied. I started the religious current by revealing the light of Gnosis to select members of the groups you call Gnostic, if that's what you mean. But I'm only the messenger of light. The light was revealed to me by Sophia. I was the first in the realm of the demiurge, as the Gnostics referred to the god of this world, to receive Gnosis. Of course, the Gnostic religion had elements of untruth mixed in with truth, but even in its diluted form, it was seen as a major threat to the stability of the world order. The backlash was more cruel and terrifying than I expected. The Inquisition nearly succeeded in completely extinguishing their flame. I didn't want to see those horrors repeated, so I adopted a different approach. I revealed my secrets to only a few men, who I recruited to work toward the spread of reason, rather than the spread of the secret knowledge. Through the use of reason, I hoped men might free themselves from the darkness of the religion of the demiurge and his church, the same church that called my sweet Sophia a whore. Reason is the devil's whore, they said. By reason they meant Sophia, wisdom. They call wisdom a whore because she offers herself freely to all, in contrast to dogma, which is exclusive to the church and therefore virgin. I knew that an age of reason would be death to the power of the church. I thought that goal could best be served by convincing the world I didn't exist. Like they say, it's been my greatest trick. Well, I said, not sure of what to ask him next. You've already stayed longer than you agreed to, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I had intended to ask you what you think about the Bible, and then I was going to ask you what you think about Satanists. But this interview has gone away differently than I expected. Honestly, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect, and I'm not sure what else to ask, so I'll just give you the floor, if you have any closing comments or if there's anything else you'd like to say. As far as the Bible, said Satan, you just have to realize that it was written by different people. They were writing about things they experienced, or writing down stories that had been passed down to them. When they say it's the Word of God, you have to take that with a grain of salt. They may believe it was God who spoke to them, but how do they know that? Sometimes it's me pretending to be God. Sometimes I appear to them as myself, as a messenger of light, to reveal the true God to them. But they confuse the true God with the demiurge, and they confuse me with the demiurge. No wonder they're confused about what's true, what's a lie, what's good, and what's evil. My true name, Lucifer, means messenger of light, yet in their minds I'm the Prince of Darkness. The true Prince of Darkness is the God of this world who they worship as the true God. And the Apostle Paul knew this. I revealed the Gnosis to him on the road to Damascus, and he was illuminated. But he's misunderstood to this day. So sometimes the Bible gets it right. Other times the truth is completely inverted. That's why it seems so self-contradictory. Sometimes what the Bible refers to as God is actually the true God. Other times it's actually the demiurge, the false god of this world. And other times it's me, either posing as the demiurge or speaking as a messenger of the light. Sometimes what the Bible refers to as Satan is me, and other times it's the demiurge, being recognized for what he is. And it's really the people who worship the god of this world who should be considered the true Satanist, if by Satan you mean the evil one, because they worship an evil god. As far as Satanists, they're just confused. Most Satanists don't even believe I exist. They certainly don't have a clue who I am or why I'm here. Some of them are atheists who see me as a symbol of opposition to the church, or a symbol of something else. People project all kinds of stuff onto me, just like they project all kinds of stuff onto Jesus, which is kind of ironic since he was really me. So I'm both the projection of everyone's ideal self and the projection of everyone's shadow. If they could integrate the two within themselves, I'd dissolve into pure light, and they would be illuminated, and I'd be free. I guess I'll end with that. Thank you for having me. And he was gone before I could thank him for stopping by and allowing me to interview him. I can't say that he dissolved into pure light, though. And as soon as he was gone, I almost immediately began to find myself questioning whether or not he had actually been there, or if I had just imagined the whole thing. But maybe that's just him, convincing me that he doesn't exist.